Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. Wallahi, we have to talk about this and we need to root this out as much as possible. I want to go into Yasir Qadhi insulting Umar ibn Khattab. And one of the reasons why he insults someone like Umar ibn Khattab is because Yasir Qadhi has come on stage to try and disattach you from the scholars, try and disattach you from the Sahabi, try and disattach you from the Saudi scholarship, right? He wants to do all of this. He wants to bring them in such a level as so that you do not respect them. And the reason why he does that, he tries to take credibility away from them to say, look, I am just as great as they are. I am just as great as they are. You need to come to me because I'm a modern scholar. I can understand and see things that they couldn't see at that time. And here I'm explaining the din to you. Wallahi, this is how dangerous it is. So you see, someone like Yasir Qadhi says in a video, he says that if Umar radiallahu anhu existed today, if he took a test in Aqidah, he would fail. A'udhu billah. Wallah, this is the same person that turns around and says that Daniel Hakikato and some of those brothers on that side, they keep slandering these scholars, they keep talking negatively about these scholars, and here is a man slandering the giant of Islam. Imagine if Umar ibn Khattab existed today and he heard these words from coming out of Yasir Qadhi's mouth. Some of Yasir Qadhi's followers, they say, no, Yasir Qadhi wasn't belittling Umar. You know, he was saying something like the Salafis, if the Salafis gave Umar ibn Khattab a quiz according to Aqidah, according to their understanding, Yasir Qadhi would fail. Umar ibn Khattab would fail. This is clearly refuted. This has nothing to do with Salafis trying to quiz Umar ibn Khattab. Yasir was trying to imply that in our modern world, we have advanced so much in education and we have so much access to knowledge that there may be questions that have arisen back 1400 years ago about Allah that none of the Sahaba, including Umar, could answer. But since we have become so modern, and now that I have studied at Yale University, there are things that if we were put in front of Umar, even Umar would fail because Western universities unpack things Muslim universities don't. Yasir admitted that when he left Medina University and studied Islam at Yale, there were questions given to him by his professors that he could not answer. So basically Yasir tried to project his own flaws onto a giant like Umar ibn Khattab and say even if Umar was living today and came to Yale University and gave the same test, Umar ibn Khattab will also fail. Again, this has nothing to do with Salafis giving Umar a test. This is blatantly made up and Yasir Qadhi did not mean it in this way. I've read and researched Yasir Qadhi and he speaks so highly of himself in a video bragging about how in his class he was the top of the top student and his test results, he achieved results that no other achieved. Like he spoke in those terms. Like, who talks like that? Do any scholars talk like that about themselves? Where is the humility? Where is the humbleness? No wonder he sees even Umar radiallahu anhu less than himself. That if Umar existed today, he would fail in an Aqidah test. Yasir never says, and I watched the video many times, that Salafis will quiz him and in their way, and according to this, Umar would fail. Nothing. This is just a made-up narrative. Rather, when Yasir studied at Yale, he started having doubts about Islam. Even ex-Muslims have produced videos about this, where Yasir admits that when he studied at Yale, his whole world came crashing down. This is apparently the modern scholar that we're all supposed to look up to, that studied at Medina, and now he's come to the West, and we can now take him now, this giant that studied at Medina, he comes. He makes a testimony that when he studied at Yale, his whole world came crashing down, and he didn't have an alternative answer to the criticism that was put forward against Islam by Western Orientalists. Some of these questions obviously had to do with Aqidah or about the Quran, about preservation. And so Yasir tried to say, even if Umar existed today and studied at Yale, he would fail an Aqidah test. This is what he was implying when he meant that. This has nothing to do with Salafis quizzing Yasir on, quizzing Umar ibn Khattab on their own understanding of the Aqidah. But Yasir constantly makes blunders, produces videos about the Quran, the standard narrative, having holes. And again, I'm never saying that Yasir Qadhi is saying that the Quran was wrong. I totally understand what he means, and that Muslim apologists need to come with a better ways to explain the ahruf of the Quran. What I'm merely pointing out is that he uses the wrong choices of words, such as saying that the standard narrative has holes. Even his elders understood that Yasir was choosing the wrong words, and they took the video down. This was after consultation. If they didn't find his explanation incorrect, why would they take down the video? Well, Yasir Sheikh convinced him his choice of words were causing more damage than good. This is apparently the sheikh that has a lot of wisdom that is supposed to now teach us Islam in the West. And that's what we have been saying all along. The guy says things and doesn't understand the damage he causes. I mean, he opens the Quran and tells people there are problematic and bizarre things in there. Is this the way you talk about the Quran? I mean, instead of using words like bizarre or problematic, why not use words like the Quran has things in there that require more explanation? When he uses terms like bizarre and problematic, it's like saying there are things in the Quran that are questionable. These terms he uses creates fitna, and it reinforces people with the idea that the Quran may have mistakes, thus questionable. This has been our main issue. He uses the wrong words. I mean, even his own elders see him doing it. That's why they forced him to take down the video. But it looks much worse, because when you're taking down the video, it's like you're fueling the ex-Muslims, you're fueling the critics, because they're like, oh look, Yasir Qadhi just uploaded a video, he exposed himself, and to cover his mistakes and cover the fact that the Quran has faults, he now removed the video, which actually proves that what we're saying about the Quran being a faulty book is just true, because now their scholar is hiding his own testimony. See the damage that Yasir Qadhi is causing for the Ummah? When he claims to be this sheikh of wisdom, sheikh of modern knowledge, he can bring Medina University to the West and start explaining things differently and start presenting Islam differently. And this is a man of wisdom. This is the new scholar for the Western Muslims. And the guy comes here, is like a crash bandicoot. Listens to the advice of his elders, removes the video, and he thinks that he actually fixed the issue, when he actually made it even worse. I mean, Yasir Qadhi talks about, people attacking him and people doing this and people doing that. This guy didn't even leave Dr. Zakir Naik alone. He even went after Dr. Zakir Naik, saying, he doubt that Dr. Zakir Naik was converting hundreds of thousands of people. Went after Dr. Zakir Naik, and Dr. Zakir Naik even had to make a refutation video against Yasir Qadhi. And this is the man that wants to talk about, he wants to unify the Muslims, while he's attacking all these scholars. Wallahi, see my video below where he literally distorts the verses of the Quran. I'll put the hyperlink below this video, and you can see where he says that the Muslims can take the Jews and the Christians as friends. Atheists, non-Muslims, Hindus, you can take them as your friends. See the refutation below this video. I, as a Muslim, if Yasir Qadhi wants to talk about the Surah of the Prophet, I'll listen to it. But if he's going to teach me fiqh, stay away. Umar Sulaiman Yaqeen Institute, stay away from these people. Scholars such as Yasir Qadhi and people like Mufti Abu Layth had confused so many Muslims. They have tried to look at almost every fiqh ruling in Islam and said there's ihdilaf in almost all of them, from wearing gold to listening to music and the length of the beard and so on and so on. Now Muslims have become in such a state that they no longer know what to practice. Because according to this view, all the teachings of Islam are up for a debate. It's become a joke. And the way they do this, they ignore all of the major hadiths. And they find some isolated Muslim scholar and they're like, oh look, he has a differing view. Therefore, we no longer can say what view is correct, this view or that view. So the Islam they have created for the masses, for the people, is just one full that's artificial in flavor and conjecture, and it becomes a meaningless religion. Eventually, they have turned it into a Christianity where all these laws are arbitrary. In fact, people like Yasir Qadhi even preaches that the hudud, the stoning a person for adultery, is more of a scare tactic rather than an application. And he says, without any shame, that there's already talk within his circle around how they're trying to reform this teaching. In other words, he's saying they're trying to come up with discussions on how to remove this teaching from Islam. I would rather stick to non-Western scholars, this is just my opinion, than to stick to, I'd rather stick to the Muslim scholars from Muslim countries than these Western scholars living in the Western countries. There's also a common argument used by Yasir Qadhi advocates that he must be right because to understand us, he must live among us and experience our experiences. Because this is the claim that they make, that, don't worry about the Wahhabi scholars, the Saudi scholars, listen to the Western scholars because they understand you, they live amongst you, they experience your experiences. Therefore, he's able to make a better judgment if he lives in that culture, and therefore he is better equipped to make a more informed fatwa. Quite frankly, that's like saying, for me to know what is haram and halal, I need to be able to go to a nightclub, experience all these things, and then give you a better, more informed fatwa if something inside the nightclub is haram or halal. This is how ludicrous it is. Most of the followers of Yasir Qadhi have used such arguments to detach you from the knowledge of classical scholars or those in Islamic countries. In fact, even today, most of Yasir Qadhi's followers would say, don't listen to Saudi scholars when they say riba is haram. Listen to what the Western scholars say, who live in the West, because those scholars go through the same difficulties you are going through. Therefore, they are in a better position to understand your position and suffering of having to pay rent. And what happens next is that those scholars are saying things like rent to own your home is not riba, and that it's different from riba, and they try to make riba halal by playing semantics. And you find those scholars themselves who make such fatwa are involved Two, in taking a house mortgage from one of those so-called Islamic financial banks. We all know that there is a universal saying that we know who you are by looking at who your friends are. Or as they say, one who hangs with dogs is a dog, or one who grows up in a certain culture usually takes from that culture. For example, when Indian Muslims divided themselves from Hindu Indians and created their own independent state, which is known as Pakistan, despite being Muslim, they were still accustomed to practice un-Islamic practices they borrowed from the Hindus, such as the girl's family giving the dowry instead of the husband-to-be. We know in Islam the man is supposed to give the dowry, not the woman, but there it's opposite. And how divorce is frowned upon, that even if your husband is abusive, that makes it almost impossible to seek divorce. Divorce is frowned upon. In the Hindu culture, if the husband died, the woman couldn't go and get married again. They would burn her with the husband that just passed away. So they would take these customs from the Hindus. Even to this day, this is practiced. The point I'm making, when we live among the kuffar, we can naturally be accustomed to their values and ethics, and even at times bend the rules to compromise the din so that it can be more accommodating in the eyes of the kuffar. So although there may be some things that they may be able to understand better, as you say, there are times when they can fall into compromisation. If you read one of Yasir Qadhi's lectures, he says how he has a Jewish friend. He openly said that it was his friend, and at times he would go and meet him and give him nasiyah, religious guidance, and so forth. Or they just talk about worldly matters. Now let me ask you, when Yasir Qadhi says he has a Jewish friend, what kind of a message does this send to the rest of the Muslim communities? They also now think it's permissible to take non-Muslims as friends. If Yasir lived in Saudi, he would never say he has a Jewish friend. But since he lives in the West and intermingles with non-Muslims, he naturally becomes desensitized and sees non-Muslims as one of his very own. And the same goes for when we see naked women and start by saying, A'udhu Billah. But after a while, when it becomes so widespread that it becomes normalized, like it's just normal, and it's not that of a big deal, that's just how living in the West is. And we start compromising. And you have to also understand, and I'm sure you're aware of it, that the governments of the West fund Islamic Western scholars and promise them so many financial grants if they preach a watered-down version of Islam. And they promise that if you say this and that, will help grow your musalla and help get you that bigger car park, help build you that Islamic bookstore, so on and so on. I even heard the Islamic preacher Abu Hamza in this country, in Australia, say that the Australian government offered ISNA, his organisation, funding, but the catch was that the government would come in and teach their version of Islam and their curriculum. Of course, Abu Hamza had a backbone and rejected this because we know what the Western version of Islam means. So what I'm saying is, you don't know the private affairs of these scholars such as Yasir Qadhi, or if they have any hidden motives for material benefits. So I would never trust the fatwa of these scholars living in a Muslim nation more than the ones living among us here. I would trust the scholars of the Muslim nations than the ones compared here.